Hello everyone and welcome again to the SQL course. Let's continue with checking how we can insert data into tables. Here I'm going to recap where we were at, so I'm going to select countries from the countries database, and there you go, we've only inserted Portugal until now. There are two things I would like to tell you in this lecture regarding inserts. The first one is that we can insert rows only in specific columns. For example, the only ones that we have to insert data and they are mandatory in our insert into clause are the ones that are a primary key and also the ones that are not null, that have that extra argument not null, because those are mandatory that have some data. When we insert data only to specific columns, the other ones that we don't specify in the insert into will have the rows as null first, and then we are going to check multiple inserts. I'm going to use the insert into clause that we've checked in the last lecture. Insert into countries.countries. Here I'm just going to insert name and population. I'm not going to insert the foundation date for this new country that we are going to insert in this table. So the new country that we are going to insert is going to be France. So I'm going to use values, and now you already know how we can insert things by the order that they appear here in the insert into clause. So in this case I can give what's the name of the country, it's going to be France, and then I have to give the population. Notice, I'm not giving the foundation date right here because I'm not naming it in an insert into clause. So as I'm not naming it, I don't need to give values here. I don't need and I can't, because if I do that, I'll have an error because I'll have three values to insert and only specify in the insert into two columns. So here is where we control which columns will get the data that we are feeding into the table. Now here the population is around 65, to be more precise, this is the number, and then I can close my parentheses. So everything is equal to what we've done in the last lecture. We have an insert into clause into a specific table, then we have the columns where we want to insert data to, or the columns where we are going to insert data, and then we pass the values, which will be the real data that we are going to insert in this table. Can you guess what is going to happen with the country ID? We are not giving country ID, but country ID will be inserted into the table. Why? Because of the auto increment feature that we've defined when creating the table. As that auto increment is on, what's going to happen is that SQL is going to add number 2 here in the country ID because it's going to increment by 1 the value that it already has in the table. Okay, so for the next countries we would have value ID 3, ID 4, and so on. If we didn't specify the auto increment feature or the auto increment parameter when creating the column, that means that here we needed to have a country ID. That was mandatory because we've defined that as a primary key. Columns can be primary keys and don't have the auto increment feature, okay? So that's totally normal and it's super common to happen. I'm going to run this one, insert into countries. The insert was successful, as we can see, and let's now select all from countries.countries. Cool, so let us take a look into this table. As you can see, we have here a new row, 2, name France, no foundation date at all, null, and then population, the population of France. Okay, so just notice that here we've selected the columns where we wanted to insert to, except the ID that had the auto increment feature in the metadata of the table. Okay, cool. So we've seen that we can select or specify the columns where we want to insert data. We can remove some columns where we don't have the information. For example, here, let's assume that we didn't know the foundation date for France, so we left it out. Now, it would be a bit cumbersome if we would have to insert things row by row, right? So there must be a way for us to insert multiple rows in a single instruction. Let's check it. I'm going to insert into. So as you might imagine, this is exactly the same. And here I'm also going to skip the foundation date. I'm going to put name and population, and now values. Now here is the new part that we can use, which is multiple inserts. These are extremely easy to understand. I'm going to insert Spain with the value of population, and then I'm going to give a new comma and insert a new tuple of values. So I open new parentheses again, and I can pass a new country. I'm going to insert Canada. So notice I'm inserting multiple values in a single insert into instruction. Okay, here I'm also lacking these countries.countries. And now I can give also the population of Canada, which is around 38 million. So 38 20583, whoops, 0. There you go. So let's recap this instruction. Insert into our table with the columns that we want to insert data to, the values, and then instead of only having a single tuple or these values in between parentheses, we add a comma and a new tuple. So we can do this multiple times. We can, for example, go here. If we needed to insert another country, we could copy and paste this and then change here the values that we wanted to insert, and we will insert 3 rows in the table. Okay, I'm going just to insert 2 right now. Let's run this one and confirm that this will go to the tables. So the query is correct. We have it syntactically correct. It ran. Let's see if it added the countries that we wanted to our table. Okay, let me run this one. Now, there we go. We have Spain, Canada, its population. Notice the country IDs incremented for Spain, which is the next row, 3, and for Canada, country ID 4. So the auto increment is really working as we are expecting. Don't forget that also because this is a primary key, this row must be unique. We can have here 2 ones or a value of 1 repeated 2 times. That's not possible with the primary key. Okay, cool. So here you've seen a couple of properties that are super interesting regarding adding data to tables. Namely, we've seen how we can subset specific columns, and also we've seen how we can introduce multiple rows at the same time. In the next lecture, we are going to finish this part of inserting rows into tables and just check some of the behavior that MySQL will give us if we insert invalid rows, just like we've done when we try to insert something bigger than the range of the small int that we've defined for the population. So I'll see you in the next lecture.